No, we can absolutely. I want to talk about everything. I kind of want to talk about this from the perspective of, like, I did not understand DEI properly until like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Well,
Yeah.
not other people who are talking about it know what it is. It's the same as CRT. It's just the buzzword
Right.
they use for everything they don't like.
No, but like what I thought it was wrong, or like and we'll talk about that. But
Yeah, let's get it. We'll get into it. Rip it.
we got 4 minutes. Rip
Yeah.
into it. Unlike Thomas's surgery, rip into it.
I got stories about that too. You're not doing that anytime soon, right? So that won't be a topic for us.
Well, we can definitely discuss. We can talk about it because I plan on, if we have another baby, I plan on like very quickly afterwards.
If you have any baby, or does it have to be a flavor? Like Madhuri was like,
No,
if we don't have a girl, we're having more kids or we're adopting kids. Like we're going to have a girl. That was
no. I plan on only having one more baby. I don't want 3.
It gets tough when you have to play the zone.
Yeah. Yep. So
except Logan is old enough now that by the time you have a toddler running around, he's a helper, not a hindrance.
Right. You know, realistically,
now it'll be 3 years before your baby's, before it's big, 2 years before running around.
Yeah.
And Logan's old enough to go hold your brother's hand.
Yeah. Logan will be like a teenager by the time
you have 3. Yeah.
The time we have a 3-year-old. Yeah.
I had a boss who was Catholic, so he had 5 kids, and when I was like, I shook my head like that, and he was like, after a while, the older ones raise the younger ones. We don't parent anymore.
We were at a party when Logan was in daycare. I'm pretty sure it was daycare. Like right before COVID, we went to a kid's birthday party at Notasium. You know where Notasium is?
Yeah, familiar with it. I haven't been there. It didn't exist when my kids were young.
Yeah. So we were at a party there, and I said something along the lines of, 3 kids is too many kids. Like, nobody should be having 3 kids anymore. And your kids are adults. It's a little different for you, Matthew. But I said that.
They were once children.
And this guy goes, well, we have 2, and my wife is pregnant with our 3rd. And I said, it's too many. I don't remember saying this. Sarah was like, you were telling this guy. And she's like, you didn't like back up when he said it. You just doubled down. And I was like, I don't remember that. It does sound like something I would do, but I don't remember doing it. Not I.
What's going on enough?
I haven't heard it, so.
Oh, maybe it was mine because my family's been texting each other, but that shouldn't, unless it's for some reason it's broadcasting through. Like, is it broadcasting through 2 different things? Because I'm hearing playback through here. Let me mute the speaker.
I'm definitely down for a sex talk episode, by the way, soon. Like, I think, because no, talking about having the sex talk.
The birds and the bees, Alex. The birds and the bees.
Yeah, because I think that's Logan's 8 going on 9 next month, and
my kids already had it by then. I don't know if you guys have had a talk
yet. We've had certain talks.
And that's the key. It is a graduated.
So basically, we had a talk about a year or 2 ago where he was saying some shit that he didn't realize was sexual, and he'd be like, oh,
Dad, can I fist my friends?
No, he was like, oh, he was humping it.
He does it.
And we basically told him not to say it, and then we said eventually we need to go ahead, and we told him, like, okay, buddy, if we tell you not to say something, there's a good reason why. I said, because we don't tell you not to say fuck, we don't tell you not to say shit, but if we tell you not to,
which are also both sex words.
Yeah. Right, but in the context of what we were doing, of how he was saying it, it was more. And so he said, sometimes when we tell you not to say something, it's because it's something you're not ready to talk about. And we started to talk about sex at that point. We said, it's about sex. And I said, sex is how we told him that's how babies are made, but we didn't tell him about the mechanics.
Yeah.
So he doesn't understand the mechanics. He doesn't understand that's how babies are made. Yesterday we had a minor one because I didn't, sometimes you don't know if they're laughing because they get the joke.
Save it for the pod. We'll have this be a topic in a week or 2.
Yeah.
Let's it's 6:30. Let's rock and let's rip into it.
Rip into it.
Rip into it. Rip it. Rip it. And I
All right.
think I got rid of the background noise.
It'd be funny if we got on to that fundraising one next in a couple weeks, and they were like, "Hey, this is actually just a cease and desist. You guys reference our podcasts way too much."
It's an intervention.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Talking About the Big Stuff podcast with Michael Cole and Matthew Cravat. I am Michael Cole.
And I am Matthew Cravat.
All right. So welcome back, everybody. Tonight, our topic is we're going to talk about DEI, which is everybody's favorite thing to talk about these days. I want
CRT. Whatever happened to CRT? Now it's all DEI.
Yeah, it's because you need it needs to be 3 letters or less, or they can't handle it. Because then it's LGBTQIZBTW. You know, I can't keep track of all of it. So it has to be 3 letters.
So I look forward to when we get to ELO because I love their music.
I don't get the joke, but
because it was, it was CRT, but now it's one D's, DEI. So next to be E, and ELO's the Electric Light Orchestra. They're a band.
Okay.
And before you were born. So anyway, DEI. We need more diversity because people in this podcast are too young and don't get my references. Motherfucker.
You're the diversity hire in this case. No. So the reason I wanted to talk about this, and we can kind of go in any direction once I introduce what I'm talking about. But so, do you know who Sam Cedar is?
Yeah. Sedition, Morning Sedition, right? He used to be the Morning Sedition.
Sure. Now it's the Majority Report.
Majority Report. Yeah, he did this Morning Sedition back in, I'm old, on Air America Radio, which is a liberal radio network. He used to co-host that, I think, with Mark Maron. I think the two of them co-hosted Morning Sedition.
Yep. So anyway, so he did one of those not Liberty. I forget there's some YouTube channel that's got one word and I forget what the word is. It doesn't matter. They do a bunch of it's a conservative debating 20 liberals or a liberal.
Yeah. He does that round table with the timer on it, and they go in.
So he did one of those, and Jubilee. I knew it was just
everything's Jew with you. You're offensive.
We could start our own called Jubilee, Jew, bully.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So anyway,
you're staring at me, not talking.
Surrounded is the name of the show. So anyway, so he did one.
How Mike just glitched for a while, stared at the screen, and then came up with the name of the show. Weird.
Yeah. So he did an episode of Surrounded, where it was one progressive is surrounded by 20 conservatives, and they were all young conservatives.
Stupid.
Some more so than others.
One person saying that that the government agencies, are making so much money and they have to pay taxes, and he's like, they don't pay taxes, they're paid from our taxes.
What do they pay taxes to themselves? Yeah.
Like this guy, and Sam just rolled his eyes like, how do I talk to this guy? He doesn't know the first thing he said.
But it's actually that guy that he was talking to that he starts explaining what DEI is, and they are all acting under the assumption that DEI is an affirmative action program.
Yeah, it's quotas.
And I, even though I agreed with it, was under the same misinformation. And Sam does starts explaining that at least within governmental DEI programs, and DEI.
I've got a lifetime of corporate. I can give you the corporate DEI right now, and quotas is not part of it. Hiring is, but it's not like the hiring part is not go hire people of this color. It's advertise your jobs where those people are. So qualified people from different audiences will know you're hiring and come to you.
Right. And so he explains that. He also explains, that it's about making sure that it's accessible to everybody. And that includes the A, which I had not heard of until that same conversation. And Alex just mentioned it a couple minutes ago, which is DEIA.
Who's Alex?
Alex is our invisible man that you and I speak to. He's our God, essentially, that nobody else knows exists, knows if they exist or not.
I was going to gaslight you that you're hearing voices, but I like that better.
Anyway, so I've not heard the phrase DEIA, but apparently it is also, there's an A in there, and that's for accessibility. And that is essentially what DEIA is doing, is making things available to everybody. And one of the ways that he explains that makes 100% sense once you hear it, but if you don't hear it, you don't know, was that he talks about like internships getting paid. And the reason why internships getting paid is a DEIA initiative is because
only rich white kids can take an unpaid internship.
Only rich kids can. I mean, mostly white, but only rich kids can take and that doesn't help. Like there could be a really smart
Then you end up hiring that intern, and you say, no, they've been here. They're really qualified. Like I didn't hire them to avoid hiring a minority. I hired them because they're great, but you didn't give them other groups an opportunity to be in that position to be the great person.
Right. And in a lot of situations, we talk about these internships can be the break-in thing. And if you're in a wealthy family, you don't necessarily need an internship to break into an industry.
Yeah.
Or
often, they can be from school programs, but they also sometimes they're like a company I used to work for did internships of basically children of the employees or people they sponsored. So like a friend of mine was like the best friend of a child of an employee. So they both got jobs because like the scientist put both their names in the hat. And when you do that, you end up thinking well, when you first hired people in the 60s, you were mostly hiring white people. And then they brought in their kids. And then they brought in their kids. And so it's kind of like the legacy programs at Ivy League schools. You're not intentionally blocking people out, but because you have these programs that are legacy based, you are bringing in more of the same old, and not realizing it. And that's kind of what a DEIA program is. One of the things it's meant to do is to bring leadership to the realization of, the way we're doing things is not the best way to do it. We're limiting our pool of people because of how we do it. What's funny is I know you shouldn't start with the A, and because going ATM is not a good idea. But if we're going to start with the A,
sometimes when it's really passionate, though, it's okay.
Yeah,
when the moment's right.
Yes,
I did it to you.
Because I'm like going,
I got you off track.
Do I make a reference to Clerks 2 or 3, or do I let that go? Or there,
I need to see the third one.
She makes that joke. She goes, sometimes if it's the right guy, I go ass to mouth. It's a great way. It's a great flirt line for a woman. What she meant it as. She was like, and you're that guy. But that made me 2. I think that was number 2.
It was in 2.
It was 2. Yeah. But so I first heard about the A like 20 something years ago, before DEI was an acronym, just the A, when I was directing and running an improv group. And we were on the interwebs, and we had a message board I used to go to called yesand.com, where we chatted. We did bullshit chat, but we talked about games, and we talked about theory, and we talked about managing a group, running a group. And people would say, we need more people of color in our groups, more diversity. And like there was an all-black group that was really great. But like most groups didn't have a lot of diversity and didn't have a lot of women often too. They just had like a bunch of white guys. And I always prided myself that my groups are almost always 40 or 50% women, depending on the size of the group. So, so I got another man in sometimes, but like I always kept it really good. And which women had a good experience in my group, but didn't quit, which was an important thing. It was that the inclusiveness of can't be a good old boys club and expect them to stay around. But I didn't have, I did have people of color once or twice in the 20 years I ran the group, for a couple of years at a time, but not a lot. Like Anisha was there for years, but she was the only one at the time. And we would say on the boards, the people who joined my group were my audience, and my audience is mostly white. It's not my fault. And then people of color on the group would say, do you ever go to the black universities and hang up signs advertising your show? There's black universities in your city. Go hang up some signs. Do you advertise in the neighborhoods you live in, like go in the grocery store and put up a sign on the board, and not go into a Latino neighborhood or a Chinese neighborhood or a black neighborhood and hang up a sign? Like, you're advertising to your people like you. So they're your audience. So they take your classes. So they join your troupe. And there was like this aha moment that it was not intentional. My audience, I don't know why my audience is white. And it's like, because you're not advertising to a multicultural audience. You're not going out of your way to bring in other people, and you just need to go out of your way to do it.
Yeah, and in the day of the internet, that should be even less of a problem. This should be something that we're like, okay, now how do we like refine this a little bit, as opposed to like, you know, when you had to go into you know, you had to drive to a community, put up something. Now you can literally just go and say, hey, we're doing this. You can write it on message boards for Black colleges and Asian, you know, there's places where you have an opportunity to do that, and you can stay in the comfort of your own home, essentially. So like there's even less of an excuse for it now. Is my point.
Yeah, it's still sometimes hard because if you don't have people in your group who have the diversity, you don't know where to go. Like that's the part of the self-fulfilling problem is.
Yeah,
you know,
and sometimes you don't know how to appeal. Like I am not a Black person, obviously, but if I was a Black person and I saw like a improv group meeting thing, and I showed up to it and saw a bunch of white people, I don't know that I would stick around. You know what I mean? Like you need to figure out how to like messaging, how to appeal to those other groups too.
Yeah, I mean,
that can be a little bit alienating.
Well, I think unfortunately a lot of people in marginalized communities are used to that, though. They're used to being one out. Like my wife is used to being the only Indian in the group. When I go to temple with her, it's weird to be the only white guy, but it's not weird for her.
Right.
But if your content of your comedy group is all, let's make Seinfeld references and Friends references, my group was a while ago, right? You know, and then, well, you're not referencing the pop culture they're into. You're doing your pop culture. Even though they're comfortable with the people, like, well, this is not really the group for me. You know, the content you're doing is not content I know. And that happens with, I was really good at, I think, making women more comfortable in my group and not making it a boys club. So women joined my group and were there for years and years and years. They didn't just come in, feel uncomfortable and leave. If somebody was making them feel uncomfortable, they left, you know. But it wasn't just harassment things. It was just the kind of comedy you did. You know, don't expect everyone to do the same thing. Embrace differences and let people thrive in what they thrive in.
Yeah. I think that I am like that with Black people a fair amount because
your imaginary friend is Black. Is that why? I don't know. I don't think you get points for that.
Nope. My imaginary friend is Black, but that's not why. I think that if you look at me, not only do I look physically white, but I look culturally white. You know, I'm wearing a Marvel shirt. I usually have gym shorts on or sweatpants on. Like, I am very white in a lot of ways. And I've been around a lot of Black people as an adult. Not as a child, I wasn't around that many Black people, but as an adult, I've been around a lot of Black people. And they will, you know, I'm a rap fan. I love a lot of Black comedians. And not just like Dave Chappelle, but like I know, like I'm pretty, you know, up to date on a lot of Black culture stuff. And so they will make references and I will get it, or I will make a reference back. And then there's usually like oh, fuck, he actually is not as like but because I don't dress a certain way, I don't act like, for lack of a better term, the way that some white guys who like Black people like, dress like and act like. Because of that, I think that I am a little off-putting at first, and then people go, "Oh shit, he's not like I'm the impression every Black comedian does of a white guy. I am that, and I'm aware of that. So it's like, gee golly gosh, guys, I am not really down for this, and I understand that that's the image I give off. But then you get to know me, and you're like, oh, this guy's just not cool. Dick. He's not cool, but he at least knows a little bit more about our community than we expected.
Nothing to do with that fact that he's a masshole.
Yeah. Alex, you had mentioned the A part. Is there anything specific that you wanted to bring up in the A?
So for the accessibility, the big part of that is
right. Okay, so Alex brings up accessibility, and again, it's not something I would have thought about, but he brings it up. Accessibility as far as people who have, whether it's learning disabilities or neurospicy, anything else that may just make what we consider everyday things of life more difficult or different. Like you have to approach them differently.
Or to
And
make it comfortable when they're there. Like my
yeah,
son is on the autism spectrum, and like when he was terrified to have to go to a job because he's like, they're not going to get me. They're not. It takes a while to understand me, and the fact that they did at his job and they took their time and they got to know, made the experience. Suddenly, he's confident about loves going to his job because they know that his personality quirks are his personality quirks, and they're just part of him. Where in some places that wouldn't be so accepting.
yeah, yep. And that's a huge part of it. And I've been in situations where it is clear that there is a rift between people at work, and you kind of go, well, like people don't always cut people slack, and sometimes we have blinders on, to other people's. I'll give an example. Alex threw it out there a few 7-8 months ago. I was still at work, so that's how long ago it was. There was a person that I did not get along with get along with very well at work. She and I really butted heads on everything, and he said it's weird that your autism and her autism just like clash. And I said to him, "What do you mean my autism?" And he goes, "Well, clearly." And I was like,
Oh, clearly.
and I was like, "What do you mean?" And I'm not a self-diagnosis kind of person, and I'm not like I'm taking that as gospel, and I have not gone and got diagnosed. So I don't want to be one of those people who's like, I have a hard time making eye contact, so it must be autistic. Like I don't want to be like a culture vulture in that way. But when he said it to me, I mean, I have other minor learning disabilities that I've been diagnosed with, and there's a lot going on up here, not in a good way. And so I took his word for it, but I did go like, oh, and I also never realized that she seemed to be on the spectrum. And then when he pointed out, I'm like, oh, that 100% makes sense about her. And so like Alex just said, we see our own kind really well because Alex actually does have a diagnosis.
Yeah. ASDAR. There you go. I had to do a gaydar reference to autism spectrum disorder. ASDAR.
Yeah. Sarah, by the way, does not think that I'm not on the spectrum at all.
So, when my son was finally diagnosed in his teen years, they were kind of, the spectrum starts with like, ADD and ADHD, like that's all in the same, and
Yeah.
that's all in the same spectrum, just way further up, kind of thing. It says, so there's lots of things in neurospicy. That's why I think of neurospicy as, it's like the exact diagnosis isn't relevant for Alex's observation that your deviation from the expected norm and her deviation from the expected norm clash.
Yeah. And I back to accessibility for a second. I got extra time on tests and stuff in high school, because I was diagnosed. They didn't have a name for it. They just said like, oh yeah, his brain takes a little longer to process information. They literally called me slow. And so they gave me extra time on tests, but like in college, I never used the extra time in college because I just didn't. I didn't want to do all the paperwork for it.
Yeah.
But I graduated college with I was an honor. I graduated with honors, and then I
got a master's,
and I got my master's, and I don't think I got honors, but I got a higher GPA. It was just a higher standard for honors in your master's program.
Yeah. I mean, so it's weird because there are little quirks. There might be a reason why you needed that time in the environment you were in. So, like one of the things that my son had to deal with was it takes him 5 seconds to adjust to a change in input. So if he's looking down at his paper writing, and then he stops and looks up to listen to the teacher, for 5 seconds he is not hearing the teacher yet. He is readjusting to listening. And then when he goes to write, it takes him like 5 seconds to get his shit together to write. So he's losing a minute in every class, in every lesson of stuff he didn't hear, and then having to figure out what are they talking about because he didn't get what just happened to get him there. So it makes schoolwork environment really tough. But in real life, not such a big deal because you're not switching writing, listening, writing, listening. Like that's not a thing that happens in real life.
Right.
The same way.
Yeah, and I think with me the big thing that I needed more time on was like literally like math exams, anything that was test based, and we just didn't do that many tests in college.
Yeah, well, your degree was more of a writing and a
Yeah,
research. Yeah.
so like I never needed that extra time, so I never bothered to go get it. But
Yeah.
like I had the availability, but having gone through high school with it, I don't know that I would have graduated high school without it.
So DEI, to
Yeah.
not track too much into the neurospicy realm as our focus.
Well, that's the A.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that need to be A.
I'm obsessed with the A sometimes.
Okay. So when a DEI program is put together, so I've been in corporate universe since last century, literally. So things that have not always been around, but been around in different ways at different times and in different parts of the growth that are now kind of under the DEI umbrella, include like, we all know sexual harassment training, right? And respectful workplace training. Years ago, my company got beyond that and they got into what's now part of DEI, but they didn't know it then, which was just awareness training. Like just being aware that people around you are different and coming from different places and doing different things. I remember, and like just uncovering your unconscious biases, because a lot of us, regardless of our background, think straight white guy as the norm, even if you're not one. That's the norm you're taught to expect, and anything else is a deviation from it. And we make assumptions based on that. I remember a class we took where they showed 4 people, right? It was me and you and your imaginary friend Adam, and then a young black guy with dreads. And so here's an older me, the older guy, you, a guy in your prime of your working years. Here's a black gentleman the same age as you, and here's a young guy with dreads. And they say in the class that's about biases, the person says, "Who do you think out of these 4 is least likely to enjoy working here and fit in and want to work here?" And idiots in the class said the guy with dreads. And I'm like, you morons, we're in the class about not making unconscious bias decisions. How do you not know this is a trick question? And the cube across from me was a guy who was a PharmD and an MBA who had super long, amazing dreads. And I got back to work and I was like, "Hey, Anthony, you would not enjoy working here, according to 10 people in my class."
Nice.
So that's a big part of it is not making assumptions and being aware of the kinds of things that you're assuming about people and about how they work. Another big part of it is, like I said, diversity in recruitment, looking for places to hire from, but that also includes training leadership people to be aware of their biases. And like when they're picturing the perfect candidate, don't be so rigid in, well, it's someone who went to this kind of school and has this kind of background and done this kind of thing, because you're probably not being a racist intentionally, but you're probably also, limiting your choices to more likely men or more likely white people or more likely white and black, but not an immigrant. The more you have in your head your imagined set of what you need, that's not really the requirements of being able to do the job. It's just your cultural bias of what you think you're looking for. The more you can limit your choices. I mean, I know that the people who are anti-DEI think, oh, you're hiring an unqualified person, and it's more, don't let the qualified person escape you because you're missing the fact that they're qualified because you're looking for the wrong things.
The big example that has been going on a lot of those right wing YouTube channels, and Charlie Kirk and I don't know if Ben Shapiro did it, but a bunch of Charlie Kirk absolutely used this example, which is if you're on a plane and the pilot walks on and it's a black woman, you're hoping that there's no problems because
your first thought is, oh no, they're probably a DEI hire. They may not be qualified.
As opposed to and I've seen people correct that and be like, well, actually, they're more likely to be qualified because they
have
had
to be overqualified to get that job.
Right. As opposed to like a white guy literally might have just gone, might have been in the Navy or the Air Force and, got, he was white and he did a decent amount in the military and then they breeze him through the process.
Yeah. So Alex is chiming in how the biggest group to benefit from DEI programs has been women across the board, different races and backgrounds. And you see that in the FAFO and the Leopards at My Face kind of posts about white women who are losing their jobs in government and go, why am I losing my job? And it's like, because the white men think you're a DEI hire. They don't think you're qualified because you're a woman. Just like you don't think the brown person's qualified. The white guy doesn't think you're qualified.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same focus. So this is a little off topic, but it's kind of related. The same focus that we see with the oh, a black woman is the pilot, blah, 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 is the same where we, I think it was Leah that posted this yesterday.
That would be my daughter for you new listeners.
Yeah. That every time there is an International Men's Day, and the only time it's Googled is on International Women's Day.
Right.
It exists, just no one gives a shit about it because it's so basic.
Yeah. Well, and every time someone says, why isn't there a this day? Why isn't there, I'm not going to do Pride until there's Military Appreciation Month. Well, there is. It's November, and you just don't care enough to know.
Yeah.
You only care when you want to not have someone else be recognized. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I know that sets off the anti-DEI crowd is that DEI programs, which are just the things we've been saying, right? Pay attention to who you're hiring, pay attention to how you treat people at work, pay attention to where you look for people. One of the things that comes with is metrics, right? They say you should have this many people, in these positions. And that sounds like a quota program. It sounds like you need to go out and hire 5 black guys, 2 Chinese guys, 1 Indian person, and Alex. It sounds like that because there's metrics. But as someone who's in marketing, let me tell you how metrics works. We know that if we are properly doing our job, if I'm getting material out on time and I'm digital marketing, if I'm putting it on the right websites and I'm putting the right material out there, then I should get a certain number of impressions and I should get a certain number of click-throughs and I should get a number of successful conversions on my website. That's the averages. If I do everything right, this is what we expect to happen. So the metrics for DEI is just that. It's not saying you better go out and find 5 black people. It's if you're doing the DEI program right, the averages of who you hire should shift and who you promote should shift and who retains should change. And that's what the metric is. Are you doing the program right? Our marker for that is, are you seeing these changes? And it's not telling you to teach the test. It's not saying just go out and hire people so you make the metrics. It's do your programs right. And whether or not
should naturally fall in line.
Will tell you if you did your programs wrong. And if you're not seeing the success, or saying success based on the metrics, if you're not hitting what you think it should have been, the changes haven't happened, go back and evaluate what you're doing. Again, because you are probably missing something beneficial to your company by not having the diversity. I'm going to stop talking for a minute so you can talk because I have more to say, but I was ranting.
I was just going to say that I kind of understand the idea as a mediocre white guy. I understand that it looks like 50 years ago, I would be so much more successful just based on all of my talent, my lack of talent and skills because I'm white. And so now it feels, you always talk about the piece of the pie, and I think that makes sense. But I also think in this case, it makes even more sense of no, at any other given time in American history, I would be doing better than I am right now. And that's not because I'm white. It's just I would be doing better because I was white. Now I'm just doing exactly how I should be doing because I am not particularly talented. And there's a lot of mediocre white guys who somehow get people to listen to them saying that, and then they don't want to admit under any other circumstance I would, and
I should get a promotion, but you gave it to someone more qualified than me
because they're black.
Doesn't look right. If you didn't hire the black guy, then he couldn't have gotten promoted over me. Mm-hmm. It's not relevant whether he's better than me. He couldn't if he wasn't here.
Yeah. And I think you're the way you just said it makes me think that maybe you're implying a little bit more of they're aware of it when they're saying it. I don't think they're aware of it. I think that there is an inherent it has the history of everything has shielded us from realizing, same way that when we talk about incels and guys how come I can't get I can't get a girl. It's like, well, because you've never done anything to better yourself.
Yeah.
And there was a time where it didn't take anything. And, women were just like hoping, for a guy to pay their bills because they couldn't get jobs. And like,
so it is. You're right. It's very much. I think if I look back at the past, all the management was white men.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's not. And rather than say that's because there was a bias against people who weren't white men before, and there were qualified people who didn't get it, instead of thinking that, they think you must have hired someone unqualified, otherwise it would be the same way it always was.
Right, exactly. Yeah. There's no, and it's weird because you see like Clarence Thomas, I think, was on the dissenting side when it wasn't affirmative action. What was it recently that the Supreme Court in the last year and a half, the Supreme Court ruled on? It wasn't affirmative action.
Affirmative action, they ruled against affirmative action. He was on the women's side.
Right.
But he was someone who benefited from affirmative action to get into the college that he got into. If it was Harvard or Yale, I can't remember which one. But like he wouldn't have gotten in if it wasn't for programs that helped him overcome the racial bias against him. Not that he wasn't qualified to get in, but he wouldn't have been considered. And then he's pulling up the ladder behind him and saying, "Nobody else, I got mine."
Right, and I don't like him as a person, but I would imagine if I were to look at his grades and his academic history, that he's qualified. Like he was qualified to be there to some extent. Now, obviously,
he just wouldn't have been considered with as much attention to see his qualifications. In the first place.
Exactly, and I think that so one of the things that came up in the Sam Cedar debate was Biden picking Kamala as his running mate 5 years ago now, or whatever. It was about 5 years ago. And they were saying like he mentioned that he was gonna pick either a black woman or a woman of color. I forget how he worded it, and they have glommed onto that. And I actually think that like that was a Biden mistake to do that way, because after he did, and I think there's lots of little ways in which we, like there's considerations like, I think Clarence Thomas, back to him for a second, he was a President Bush Senior pick, right? And and I'm sure he was picked partly because he was black to make Republicans look more, progressive. You know what I mean? And like,
I think that the Bushes, both of them, were not as racially biased as a lot of other Republicans are.
Sure. And I agree with you on that.
I think they had DEI mindsets. I think more than a lot of other Republicans.
Yeah, but there's all these little things where both sides have done little things like that.
It is fair for Biden to say, "Hey, out of all the people in the world, I think I need a balance of someone who's a woman, who's of color." To balance what I know, and there's plenty of qualified people out there. I'm going to evaluate them and pick the best one that I think is out there. And it's going to be as good as any other way that I pick people. Whether I say I want a Southerner to balance the fact that I'm from Delaware, I want a West Coast person. You're always picking something about people.
Yeah, and I agree. The way you just said it was so much better than the way Biden said it. But Biden, whether like him or hate him, he was a gaffe machine in a lot of windows or periods of his life. Like he said stuff that I was like, oh, why would you say it like that? Like a lot.
Yeah, all the time. Like he did 100%.
Oh yeah.
It was hard to tell when his brain was going because he always said stupid shit.
Yeah, I remember about a year before Obama picked him as his running mate. I remember hearing the first time I ever heard of Joe Biden was that he said, "Finally, America's got an articulate black man running for president." And then the next time I heard of him, Obama was picking him as his running mate. And I'm like, why are you picking that guy? And then, as time has gone by, it's like, oh, because he made racists feel better about electing a young black guy.
I mean, but he also was the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He had tons of foreign affairs experience, which was Obama's biggest downfall. That he hadn't done anything international, and that was a perfect balance. And Biden was also one of the most beloved people across the aisle. He worked across the aisle better than anyone else.
Yeah,
and Obama knew he was going to have issues with that because he was already seeing it when he was in the Senate. So there were other reasons besides, but also, man, I think it's dangerous to hire and get a typical politician white guy because it makes the assassins think, oh, we can have a white guy really fast. Should hire someone worse than you as your VP. So they go, well,
that's what Trump did. The assassination attempt stopped because
the least popular vice president ever. He's beaten Dan Quayle on least popular.
Oh, yeah. Nobody wants that human booger to be president. Although he would be
the furniture in the Oval Office.
Yeah. If Vance were to become president now, there's the window's closing. He would be the youngest president in history.
So he has to get older than
Roosevelt. Roosevelt was the youngest. Kennedy was the youngest elected specifically to president. Roosevelt was younger. He took office after Harrison died. I think it was Harrison. I could be wrong on who.
Was Harrison the 30 Days guy? Yeah.
I think it was that. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. Good. Thank you for that little tidbit.
Yeah. Vance is like 25 days older than me, and that, is not reassuring.
About mediocre white guys are in a position they can do.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I don't like the guy, I would guess that he is less mediocre than me in a lot of ways because he went to Yale, right?
Yeah. He's not what he pretends to be.
Right.
I mean, he's an idiot and a moron, but he's not dumb.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Same like Ted Cruz. Although Ted Cruz came from a bit more like means, whereas I think Vance genuinely came from.
He grew up in a mansion.
Vance did?
Yeah. Yeah, he wrote a book lying about it.
Oh, I didn't know.
His mother was like the president of the university, and that job came with the mansion.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, he wrote his little hillbilly elegy book, but it misrepresents his actual background.
That motherfucker.
Mm-hmm. Which is one of the issues that he's so much against women in positions of power, and his mom put in place the diversity and equity programs at her university.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm glad we talked about the real meaning behind DEI because I was really shocked watching the Sam Cedar stuff, and he kept drilling it down every time one of them would say it, and I'm like, really? And then I after that, since that conversation went, and it's been covered in a lot of different sources, more and more people are talking about it. I'm like, this was not bad. This was not good messaging because I'm on the side and I didn't know it. So that means the messaging.
Because it wasn't messaging. It's the same as the trans issue during the election.
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't the party platform. It was the Republican attack ads. Yeah. And it was like, how do you start playing defense and go, no, what you're saying is wrong. It's this, that's not. Then it's why you're talking about what they want you to talk about. Talk about what you're going to do for the country. You're in a no-win situation there. So what I want to say is I want to talk about the next president of the United States and what he says about DEI. Because he's the best speaker. Not necessarily the person I want to be president, but the person I'm hoping will be president. Secretary Pete.
Oh, okay.
So right. So Buttigieg, there's a clip of him on an interview show, and I don't know if it's with a adversarial host. He's very good at that, so it may very well be. Or maybe
he did the surrounded thing too. Just so you know,
he's really good at that kind of stuff. But someone says to him, "Let's talk about DEI with him in this interview," and he's like, "Well, first of all, let's spell it out: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's not use letters." He goes, "What's the alternative to that? So if we're going to talk about DEI, let's talk about the opposite. What is it if we don't have DEI? Instead of diversity, it's uniformity. Is that what we want? Uniformity? Everyone doing the same thing, acting the same way, no original ideas? And then it's equity, equity, inequity? Is that what we want? Is that what your company wants to do? Treat everybody inequitably? That doesn't sound right. And then inclusion, what? Exclusion? That's the opposite. Why would you want uniformity, uniformity. I lose it. Uniformity,
non-equity,
inequity, and exclusivity. Those are not things you want. Why would anyone want that? All DEI did was say, "Hey, let's think about it in a thoughtful way and make programs to make sure you stay away from those three things that we all would agree we don't want to have."
Yeah.
Except for maybe a Catholic school, which really wants uniformity. They want all those little kids in the little uniforms marching like little Nazis.
I will say, I think that's a great way of looking at it, and that will affect, if you do that with the average person who's been indoctrinated against DEI, I think it will be somewhat effective. But you listen to like Tucker Carlson, there was a clip of him that from, this is 3-4 years old, maybe a little longer even, where he was like, diversity is our strength, like, and he and that was a big talking point, like, where it was, they were like basically saying like it's not good that we have difference, like we have different people coming, like that messaging was hard.
So the response I would have to that, if I was in a debate with someone saying that in that Jubilee channel, is, so let's say we're going to play baseball against each other. I want diverse talents. I want a first baseman, a second baseman, a third baseman, a shortstop, outfielder, pitcher. You want 9 first basemen to play the whole game because you want them all to be the same.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear which is a more powerful team to put together. A bunch of first basemen or people who can play every position.
No, and I 100% agree with you. My point.
You do? Of course you do. I'm right. But like that's the kind of response when they in isolation say, oh, we don't want diversity. Say, look at diversity that way. It doesn't have to be racial or religious or gender. It can just be different backgrounds and talents.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which is how I used to cast my improv show. So while I didn't do a good job of advertising in the right places to draw people out for a long time until I kind of had it presented to me that way, I knew improv groups. I'd seen improv groups, and most of them didn't last, where the director was like, this is the style of comedy that I do, and I'm going to put together a troupe of 5 people like me. And if you think about like Friends, it was 5 Chandler Bings. I'm just going to all do, be witty and sarcastic. And the shows were boring because they're one-dimensional. I always went with what I called the peanut butter and jelly with a little bit of marshmallow fluff approach. I didn't want everyone, I was smooth peanut butter. I didn't want to hire a bunch of smooth peanut butters. I want someone who's jelly. I want someone who's rye bread because that's a little different. I want some marshmallow fluff. I want some Nutella. I want different talents, different styles. And whenever someone joined my improv troupe, we tried to tease out what their differences were that were different than the rest of us and find ways to integrate that into our show, into our style. So every time we had a cast change, even just a person cast change, it should change our show and the flavor of what we are, just like adding a different ingredient changes your sandwich.
Yeah.
I was very, because of my corporate background of DEI type stuff before it had a name, very aware of that and cognizant of that I thought that you really need to have those differences to make it good. And I think that's where a lot of people have gone wrong and stuff like that, is they want a bunch of people like me. We think exactly the same. We'd be a great team. And you're not, because you're not filling in each other's weaknesses. You're just having the same weaknesses. Superman and Supergirl together, great. They're really strong, but the one piece of kryptonite takes them both out, rather than Superman and Captain Marvel that have different weaknesses. So take one out, the other one's still there.
Yep. Yeah.
I had a good DC since you're playing Marvel today.
Nice. Oh, and you said Captain Marvel, you meant Shazam.
I meant the real Captain Marvel, yes. The first Captain Marvel. The person who had the name Captain Marvel in 1940, written by C.C. Beck. That Captain Marvel.
I was explaining to Logan, he started reading he read the Court of Owls book, and so he's been like, I'm really getting into DC, and he's like, well, why is it called DC? I'm like, it's Detective Comics. And he goes, but like Superman's in DC, and Superman's not a detective. And I'm like, well, it's because in the 30s and 40s, it was like 90 different little companies, and then eventually they all ate each other up.
Yeah, the main company was National Periodics.
Yeah,
it was National, and then Detective Comics with Batman was the #1 bestseller, so we just made the name of the company Detective Comics.
Yeah, and so I explained that to him, and I said, and I said originally Shazam was called Captain Marvel, but his power set was a little too similar to Superman, and so they probably didn't think that they wanted to be, using both. So
DC sued them out of business. It wasn't DC, it was Fawcett Comics, and DC sued them and didn't actually win the lawsuit. I don't think. I think just bankrupted them in the years of having them in court, and then when they bankrupted them, they bought them. And then in 1976, brought the character back. Like the character really didn't exist for 30-something years.
Right. And in the meantime, Marvel's Captain Marvel showed up.
Yeah.
And so that's why they changed to Shazam, and I explained that.
Well, they didn't change Shazam until the 2000s. Like it was still Captain Marvel for decades. They just both had a Captain Marvel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Actually, Marvel had multiple Captain Marvels floating around.
Yeah. Yep. because there's Carol Danvers before her. Wasn't the
Well, the original was the Kree warrior Captain Marvel, who was Captain Marvel, and then Monica Rambeau was Captain Marvel for a while.
Yeah.
Carol Danvers is Captain Marvel. Yeah, had multiple people who used Captain Marvel.
And that brings us to the next point of DEI, which is
different names for your superheroes.
No, is that I want to talk about. I think that Marvel Studios is a good example of a problem with DEI with the public that doesn't know what DEI really is having, which is movies, and Marvel has been a big attack on, has had a lot of attack on this, which is or gotten attacked for this. I mean, anytime you cast a non-white, non-man person as like the main character or one of the main characters, now it's getting called DEI, and the idea from a audience standpoint that is the case is crazy to me.
I mean, it may be DEI, but that's not a negative. Like, it's not a quote.
Sure.
Like,
they want the audience to...
Well, but it's saying, you know what? When we wrote these comics in the 60s, we just wrote about a bunch of white guys.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 70s, we sprinkled in a couple of black guys, and we called them Black Panther and Black Goliath. And, because we want to point out, here's our black guy. And we tried to, it was an improvement, but it wasn't perfect by any means. And so now as they're making these movies, they're going, you know what? There's no reason that Heimdall has to look Norse. They're gods. They're not their real forms. Let's open up who we look at. Oh, Idris Elba would be an interesting take.
The sexiest man alive. Yeah, let's.
I mean, find a better actor than him. There's not. I mean, he's there's equally good, but he's in the top echelon. They didn't hire him just because he's black, but they're like, why not hire him? There's, if you think of, the original Captain Marvel, and our story is just going to be someone on Earth who's an engineer. Can it be Annette Bening instead of an old white guy? Sure, she's a great actress. Hire Annette Bening.
Yeah,
it does. It's undoing the mistakes of the past, not being progressive and doing something crazy.
But it's also because the audience, there's always been a black audience. There's always been a female audience and an Asian audience and a Latino audience.
The same as my advertising for new comedy members and for my show in the places the audience was. Like, you didn't give them a movie to come to.
Yeah.
With representation.
And because this is another back to the mediocre white guy mentality, like the idea that all the movies used to be about me. All the movies used to be about me. Well, I that's one thing I have not fallen into. I mean, I also am aware that there's a reason I don't get jobs because I'm not particularly talented. But as far as audience, I love watching. Now there's sometimes where I watch or a movie or I read a book that I'm like, this isn't for me. This doesn't connect for me. And when I've tried to read something or watch something out of the target audience being
level, above the Dr. Seuss level.
No, what the audience targeted is not specifically not white guys.
I'm not particularly into rap music because it doesn't resonate with me. It's not a racial thing.
Right.
It just doesn't resonate with me in general. Some things do. It's not, brilliance is brilliant. So the best pieces that rise to the top do because they resonate with everyone. That's why they rose to the top.
Exactly.
But same way that opera doesn't move me. It's just not my thing.
Right. And so, but I've watched a lot, and I will say a lot of this has changed because when I was a teenager, I took a film class my first semester of college, and we watched Do the Right Thing, and I remember thinking that movie was stupid. I remember thinking
I remember walking out of the theater going, that was one of the most amazing cinematic events of my life.
Yeah. And I've seen it since, and I've realized part of it was I was a teen, so I saw that movie in 2003. The movie came out in 89 or 90, and the LA riots took place in 92. And I didn't have all that context. So to me, it seemed very unrealistic that him playing his boombox too loud resulted in a riot. And then as I became more aware, all of the actual history of the country and started seeing a lot of that stuff, it all of a sudden it became more, oh, this movie is not far fetched. And once it was not far fetched, it was like, this is a brilliant movie. But you had, and sometimes you understand a movie's far fetched, and you're okay with that because that's the style. But what movie didn't click there? And so there's been a lot of times where I've watched something that I didn't get, and then with context added on later. But there's plenty of stuff that I like watching. That like I loved Crazy Rich Asians. I thought that movie was excellent.
So I have one major problem with Do the Right Thing before you leave it behind.
Sure.
My best friend, his father was from Sicily. My best friend growing up owned a pizzeria in our neighborhood. I've been to 100 pizzerias in New York. Danny Aiello saying "ma pizzeria" through the entire movie sounded like a fucking idiot. I've never heard anyone say pizzeria like him. It's a pizzeria.
He got nominated for an Oscar for that.
Idiot. For making up his own word, pizzeria. Was he pissing in it? Ridiculous. Everything else is great. And I really like, the moment I like the most in the movie is the round robin of all the different ethnicities talking shit about the other ethnicities.
Yes.
Just as Spike's way of saying, I could have made this movie from any viewpoint. Like every ethnic group has its blind spots and has its issues and is being prejudiced against by a different group.
Yeah.
I just want to show you in one scene that it's a round robin. It all exists. This just happens to be the black story because that's my story to tell. I thought that was a brilliant little moment.
Yeah. And then, so fast forward 30 years from, not from when I saw it, but from when the movie came out, and you start having the Oscars So White, and they changed the rules to the Oscars. And a huge portion of why they changed the rules of the Oscars, and there's this like chicken or the egg situation when it comes to a lot of DEI stuff, which is, are we neglecting the audience, or like where's the problem lying in this situation? And the Oscars to me is the most clear chicken or egg problem, because we're not rewarding movies of made by black people, or like with a predominantly black cast and crew. We're not with a predominantly woman cast and crew. We're having those issues. Is it because they're not getting made properly, like to that
Is it because
standard?
they haven't earned it, or because we're measuring on the wrong standard?
And to some extent, it's kind of both. And part of the reason why is because the thought was, as far as an investor trying to invest in a movie, trying to get a movie made, well, yeah, black, like
You're not going to win an Oscar.
A Medea movie, for example, may make a good amount of money, but Medea will make money, and maybe Moonlight prior to 10 years ago, the idea of a Moonlight getting successful, that's a really niche audience. And so by making the Oscars kind of have to reflect that, then now you have people going, well, we're pumping money, like people pump money into Oscar bait movies. Let's fill out these Oscar bait movies with a more diverse cast and crew, so that we're not having, was there any black people in Godfather 1? I love Godfather 1. I'm not trying to shit on it, but
probably not. I think it was about an Italian family who was probably racist as hell. So
yeah,
like the characters wouldn't hang out with black people, so it made sense. But yeah,
and so by making those rules change, now you've given especially as the biggest award show.
It was all Italians and 2 Irish people. Frankly, I don't think it was.
Yeah.
Oh, and a Jew. Hyman Roth.
Yeah. Well, that's Godfather 2. Godfather 2 has a little more diversity, actually, but probably only incidentally, because they had a bigger budget.
Go to Cuba.
Well, and they had a bigger budget, but the idea of the Oscars being the biggest show, the biggest award show in cinema, by them changing the standard, the industry will follow suit, because the industry isn't going to be like, we don't want Oscars. Like, studios aren't going, well, we don't want Oscars. They still want the Oscars. They still campaign for them, and they put money into making movies. There's always a movie where you're like, this movie feels like you made it trying to get Oscars.
Did you watch the Ricky Gervais series on HBO, Extras?
Yes.
There's the whole thing about, you're making a World War II movie, you're going for an Oscar. Playing a nun in a World War II movie.
And then he was hosting the Golden Globes the night that she won for the movie she eventually won an Oscar for, which I'm forgetting the name of it, but it was The Reader. Kate Winslet won an Oscar for The Reader as a I think she was a Nazi in or like a Nazi sympathizer or something. I've seen the movie, but it's been a while. And during the Golden Globes opening monologue, he said, "I told you if you did the Holocaust movie, you'd get an Oscar nomination."
Yeah,
and then she actually won for that.
Yeah, so I think the problem that you're describing in Hollywood is what I think about Michelin restaurants.
Okay.
So getting Michelin stars, the history of it started from the Michelin Tire Company wanting people to take road trips. So saying, here's places you should drive to, right? Because the criteria they set up for what earns you a Michelin star restaurant was basically based on French food. So Indian restaurants, Chinese restaurants, all these other places don't earn. They get expanded Italian restaurants, expanded British, but it took a long time before any ethnic that wasn't Europe won Michelin stars, because that's the style of the food, of the service, of the ambiance was not what they built the award around. They built the award around, and they would say, we didn't do it to invalidate anybody.
No.
Just the time we did it, we didn't think about it, and we just didn't change the criteria until now to make it so restaurants that firmly deserve the recognition just couldn't earn it because how you do creme brulee was an issue, so you can't win.
Similar to Danny Aiello having only Italian Americans on the wall of his pizzeria.
Yeah.
Which, it is funny because that ends up being like the exact thing that causes the conflict in that movie is, now that I think about it, it's a DEI for the wall. Like, why can't it's because it's the Italian Hall of Fame or whatever.
Why is it all about, and it's also from a bad business standpoint.
Yeah.
I put the things I like in my restaurant versus the things that my customers would like and my employees, to make my employee feel at home here.
Yeah.
We have my employee who doesn't like working here because he feels like he's a second-class citizen to the people on the wall. So it's an example of the need for DEI.
Yeah.
If Danny Aiello had DEI, he would have had a better experience.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Should we start wrapping up?
I'm not going to wrap just because it's the DEI episode.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't you just do your thing? Unless you have any other points to make about DEI before we go on.
No, I think we made some good points, and I just want to. Are we going to say that if you're watching this on video, I think you should diversify your experience by clicking the like button, making a comment below, subscribing to the channel, and ringing the notification bell, because then you can be included equitably to everything that we put out. And that's the bottom line, because I said so.
Yep. And if you're listening to this podcast and
in your ear holes,
he
loves that.
Yeah, I love when he says that. If you're listening to us, you know what podcast app you're listening on. Give us a like or a thumbs up or whatever your podcast app allows. Reviews typically are on there. That is helpful.
What you can do? Can I cut in for a second? Here's what I was listening to one of my podcasts of choice the other day. It's called Gavel Gavel. It's a very cool podcast that looks into legal cases, and they reenact and they read the transcripts. And they were like, "Don't forget to give us 5 stars on iTunes." And I took out my laptop, pulled up iTunes, which I have an account on, even though I don't like iPhones, I don't like iTunes, I don't use it. I use the program iTunes just to go in and rate podcasts that I want to rate. So go ahead and install iTunes. If you don't use iTunes, install it and look us up and give us a 5-star review on iTunes, even if that's not your podcaster of choice.
Yeah.
Back to you, Mike.
Anyway, so you got that point, and I completely agree. If you want to give us gifts of money, you can do that by going to
iTunes. Give us money.
Yeah. You can go to patreon.com/talkingaboutthebigstuff. What was that one, Matthew?
I think you said patreon.com/talkingaboutthebigstuff. It's a lot of words.
That is right. I said patreon.com/talkingaboutthebigstuff. And on there we have 4 options. There's a $0 option.
So there's a 0 level.
Yeah, I forgot about that last week, and Matthew corrected me. But you can go on there and you can subscribe for free. And just
when you say there, you mean patreon.com/talkingaboutthebigstuff.
Exactly. You can go on there and you can do and you can sign up for free. and you'll get notifications when the podcast episodes drop. But you'll also get notifications about streams. So like we stream Monday nights typically at 6:30 Eastern, but it will let you know about those. And if you wanted to, you can hop on and add $1 a month to watch those, as well as getting the episodes early and all that good stuff. $3 allows you to get pretty much all the content in audio format, without all the censorship. And then $10 allows maybe a little more content, but typically it's also that there's a video version available to you. That is also available for $3 per episode of those. But if you want, you can just $10 a month gets you all of them, gets you everything. But there's options on there. Go on, explore at patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. And Matthew, anything else?
I just want to thank all of you who have been listening to us talk about the big stuff, because Mike's mediocre and he needs your support.
Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. It's just the beginning. If you have thoughts or questions or topics you'd like us to tackle in a future episode, drop us a line on our social media channels. Engage with this video when you are now watching it as a VOD on YouTube. Send us an email. We love hearing from our listeners, bringing us topics, because if you leave it up to the three of us, we're going to eventually be talking about underwater basket weaving. So we would appreciate you guys reaching out a little bit. Don't forget to subscribe to Talking About the Big Stuff on your favorite platform. Give us a 5-star rating. Engage with it. Criticize us. We need to grow and be better, and you're going to help us be there. You're going to help us get to that point. It really helps us more to reach out and also to keep the conversation going. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more big ideas and more thought-provoking discussions. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep talking about the big stuff.
The preceding podcast has been a Chocolate Diamond Media LLC production. Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.